BMC Technology Solutions. So here we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so for today's, for the first part of today's session, we will do a general overview of the 1099s in Sage Intacct and the differences between a multi-entity versus a single entity setup. We'll also check out the proper setup for vendors and employees to record 1099 eligible transactions. We'll take a look at how to update existing 1099 transactions or upload opening or historical balances for the current reporting year, which will be for 2023, filed in January of next month. And then we'll explore the options to electronically file 1099s or print out paper forms out of Sage Intacct and the partners. And then I'll provide some resources on the troubleshooting our common issues and additional resources. Now you'll see a variety of symbols used throughout the presentation. The video icon means that I will show a pre-recorded video in a demo or test environment that's part of the presentation. The little red link symbol will have an attached URL, which will take you to the designated topic in the release notes or the help center or an additional resource. So after the webinar is over and you receive a copy of these presentation slides, you'll be able to click on that link and it will take you directly to that resource. And then the last icon on this page is the people icon, which means we will pause for a polling question, and the polling questions are vital to receiving those CPE credits as part of this webinar. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pause for our first polling question of the session.
Right. The first polling question is, how do you currently file 1099s? And our choices are e-file through Tax Bandits, e-file through another system. Looks like I duplicated that. Sorry about that. Another party files them for us, or I'm not sure, I don't know. We'll give you a couple of minutes or a couple of moments to do this. Votes are still trickling in. I'm going to close it down. Last chance to answer. I'm going to end the poll. Here are our results. Looks like the vast majority of folks e-file through another system. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on through and we'll take a look at our multi-entity setup versus our single entity setup. Over the next few slides, we'll also take a look at a few other setup preparations as you prepare to file your 1099s. In addition to the multi-entity versus single entity setup, to ensure that you, if you need to either issue a separate 1099 per entity, or you're using one of your single entities to file for all entities, you'll need to ensure that in your company subscriptions under the multi-entity management, that the checkbox to issue a separate 1099 per entity is checked. Now, if you're not seeing your subscriptions under the company settings, or you're not able to get to this, most likely you don't have admin permissions, or if you don't have enough other permissions, you may have to contact your admin to be able to make sure that this checkbox is checked if you are under the multi-entity setup. Then once you make sure that that checkbox is checked, you'll want to make sure that under the company settings for each entity in the company setup tab, that you make sure that the legal address, legal filing address, and then the federal IDs are populated for each of those entities, because you don't want to end up filing the entities where your federal ID or your address doesn't correspond to what the entity address is. For single entity structures, your federal ID will be located in the company setup tab under company. You'll edit and then you'll populate the field for the federal ID, or make sure that that field is already correctly populated. For multi-entity settings, if you are navigating to the company setup and edit tab to edit your federal ID field, you'll notice that it is not there if you have checked the issue a separate 1099 per entity. Let's take a look at our vendor 1099 setup. You can set up your vendors to track totals for printing 1099 forms. If you're setting up a vendor mid-year or for prior years, you can also enter historical year-to-date amounts so that the amounts balance at the end of the year. We'll review how to update those historical amounts in just a few slides here. And this little video icon designates that this is a preset video in the system. So we'll go ahead and watch this little video on how to edit a vendor record to be able to add the 1099 information. So here we are in accounts payable, wherever the vendor is situated. And we'll go ahead and click edit on that particular vendor. You'll click on additional information and notice that the tax ID is blank. So we'll go ahead and enter a tax ID. In this case, we're just entering a fictional tax ID. You'll notice that the 1099 name here, that field is normally blank and it will populate from the print as on the vendor record. In the case that you need to have a different 1099 name from your vendor record print as, you can designate the 1099 name here and it will print as a separate 1099 name on the form. So for example, here we have RWS Commercial, but they're filing their 1099s as doing business as RWS Commercial Sales LLC. Now under that, you'll see the Form 1099 link. This will open up a separate box where you can fill in the 1099 information per entity. So on the form name, you'll click the drop down and populate your form name. Intacct will give you a listing of all of the acceptable forms to be able to file through all of the options in the software. And then on the second box here, we have our default 1099 box. This is the box on the form itself. So normally for non-employee compensation, form any 1099 NEC, your default box is going to be box 1, non-employee compensation. And then we've designated in this particular example to be your entity USA 1. Now, once you populate those fields, the initial values for the year will pop up. So if you are doing this for the very first time and you're adding a vendor that may perhaps have initial values, you can add pre-existing values that you're bringing in from perhaps an outside system to have a starting balance for that vendor. And here we are adding initial values for the 2023 filing year of an existing balance that we want to add on to perhaps transactions that have already been coded in the system. Then you'll want to save, and that completes the process of editing a vendor or adding 1099 information to a vendor. Each transaction that you then create for that vendor is automatically tagged with the appropriate 1099 form type and box. And additionally, if you have the options, to be to have a configuration of an override on the 1099 box and form, the values you can then change on a case-by-case basis on the transaction level, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a couple of slides. Let's look at the employee 1099 setup. The employee 1099 setup is very much like the vendor 1099 setup, where you can set up any employee to track totals for printing on the 1099 forms. And much like the vendor setup, if you're setting up an employee mid-year or for prior years, you can enter historical amounts so that the amounts are balanced at year end. And we'll go over that in a couple of slides as well on how to enter historical information. But let's watch this little video here to edit our employee for 1099 eligibility. So here we're editing the employee information. We perhaps might add in a 1099 name if it's different from the employee print as on the employee contact record. Then you'll click the little link for the form 1099, and much like the vendor record, you will populate which form belongs to that particular employee. And you'll fill in the corresponding values for the default box, the entity, and if you have any initial values to attach to that employee, you can add them at this point. You'll then want to save your employee, and then future transactions attached to this employee are now eligible to be marked for 1099. All right, so let's take a look at our accounts payable and purchasing settings. If you don't have purchasing, the purchasing module, you'll look at the accounts payable options only. By default, each vendor or employee is set up to have a specific 1099 form and box to which all of the associated transaction information is tagged at the vendor or employee record level. If your company is configured to enable the override of 1099 form and box for line items, you can also change the values on that case-by-case basis during the transaction creation. This particular requirement does require you to either be subscribe to accounts payable, purchasing, or time and expenses. You don't have to be subscribed to all of them, just that particular area that you're working in. And then in the corresponding configuration settings, here we have two screenshots, one for accounts payable, one for purchasing. Both of them have the same option, with the exclusion of the accounts payable having an additional box to file e-file for the tax bandits configuration. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides, but these configuration settings allow you to flag the 1099 overrides for that particular transaction and that particular form for that transaction. What that means in short is if you normally have a vendor that you always put your 1099 transactions to the form 1099 NAC box 1, but for this one particular instance, one time this year, for this bill, it needs to go to form miscellaneous box 3 or box 10. These features will allow you to do that on a case-by-case basis at the transaction level. What it also allows you to do is, if you have these two checkboxes checked, is if you have a transaction that is, once you have these boxes enabled, all of your future transactions will be automatically checked for 1099 eligibility. However, if you receive a bill or you have a transaction that flows through purchasing that is not eligible for 1099, perhaps it's maybe supplies that you've purchased or does not go in, it doesn't correspond with that vendor's 1099 eligibility, then you are able to uncheck that box as part of that transaction. And by doing so, those amounts are not included in the total of your 1099 reporting amounts for that vendor or employee. All right, so let's take a look at our 1099 report. You're going to want to run the 1099 report before you print or refile your 1099 forms. By doing so, you can verify that vendors and employees are set up with the correct 1099 form and box. And you can also review the taxable amounts to make sure that they are correct. As a best practice, you'll want to run the 1099 report for either vendors or employees separately, which we'll review in this little video, how you can check the boxes for either or, but not to run them at the same time. Only vendors and employees that are set up for 1099 treatment appear in the 1099 report, which means that prior to amounts showing up for a vendor as 1099 amounts, you have to enable 1099 eligibility at the vendor or at the employee record. And we just reviewed that a couple of slides ago, how to edit a vendor to designate them, or edit a vendor or employee to designate them the correct form and box number. Now, after you run that report initially, maybe you're running this report currently, maybe you've run it a couple of weeks ago, or you're in the process of cleaning up your 1099s, you might find that you will need to update 1099 information for a particular vendor or employee. Now, after you make those corrections, you can run that report again to verify that the information is now correct. And then you can proceed with printing or electronically filing your forms, which will review how to update those existing 1099 transaction and information here shortly. And as a reminder, 1099s are for US operating companies only. Let's go ahead and watch this little video, and I'll pause it for any comments. So here we're under accounts payable, we're under the reports column, and we are running the 1099 report. The report already pre-defaults to your start date and end date. You can change this if you wish, or you can change the report period here to be for the current year, but it defaults to being the current reporting year. On the filter settings, these are the two options that you have to toggle for selecting either all employees or all vendors. And this is where our best practices are to, we're recommending that you don't run for both of these checkboxes, you run them for individual, their individual reports. So here I'm going to go ahead and select for all vendors. You can also, if you're reviewing your vendors, you can choose your from to vendors or choose a specific vendor to review all of their 1099 eligible transactions. Same goes for your employees. And then the next filter option gives you a grouping, which you can group your 1099 information by either vendor and employee or by a specific 1099 form. And then you can choose whether to run it for, you'll have to choose whether, if you're in a multi-entity setting, you'll have to choose which entity you're running it for. Or if you're wanting to run it for all entities, you'll have to create an entity group to run it for all entities, but it will ask you to pre-select the entity that you're running it for so that you can make sure that those amounts are corresponding to the correct totals for that entity. Now, you also have the next little box here is your 1099 form type, this little bubble to select the forms. In this report, if you're running this report maybe for the first time or you're a first-time user running this report, the 1099 forms are not automatically selected. So if you've pre-selected and pre-filtered everything above this little bubble and you click view and you don't see any information in there, it's because you did not select a 1099 form type. The form types are like 1099 NAC, the dividends, interest, etc. You can select individual forms, or you can select a range of forms, a couple of forms, or you can select all of your forms. So in this little selector, it will give you all of the forms that you have to be able to select to view in the report. And again, in the filter above it, you can group it by report type so that you can see all of your amounts for maybe your 1099 NACs. And then the next filter gives you the option on where, how to pull in the amounts. Do you want to only show 1099 amounts? Do you want to show 1099 and non-1099 amounts? Or do you want to show both? For this particular feature is for any employee or vendor that's that you're running the report for. It will include all transactions for if you're showing all, including those that are not 1099 eligible. Now, the next little box allows you to show minimum eligible amounts only. If you have this checkbox checked, it will pre-filter the amounts for either the employee or the vendor, whichever one you're running the report for, but it will pre-filter those amounts specifically for minimum eligibility requirements that pass the threshold for that form. So for example, for 1099 NEC, the minimum threshold amount for filing purposes is $600. If you have this checkbox checked, it will only show amounts $600 and greater. If you do not have this checkbox marked, it will show all transactions that are eligible for 1099 reporting purposes. And then you have the option to view this in summary or detail form. And then the other two boxes down here, you can exclude credit card payments. This typically is 1099 transactions are typically sent out by the credit card companies. You can also include bills paid with credits or advances, because credits and advances do qualify for 1099 eligibility. However, they are not necessarily included in this 1099 report unless you include bills paid with credits or advances. So we've got all of our filters set. We're going to view this report. And for my particular viewing here, I have selected my vendor, and we can see that the vendor that we edited previously are doing business as RWS Commercial Sales LLC. With our tax ID, you can verify your tax IDs all in this report. And then you can see that these are my initial values. If you had transactions, it'll show you the bill amount and the paid amount that's qualified as the 1099. It will also give you the category with the box number. And for our purposes in this particular report, we are totaling for the vendor. You can also total for the form itself, the form type itself. Now, this is a 1099 report for you to verify the amounts. It is not the actual report or the 1099 file that you will use to export out of the system or to print your 1099 forms. This is simply a report that shows you all of the 1099 information based on the filtered criteria that you have selected in the report for your review, and it is not the actual report that you would export, for example, for the e-filing. We'll talk about how to populate that report in a little bit.
Toma, would you have time for a couple of questions right here?
So I do see one question come in.
Yeah. So if you have a vendor that uses multi-entities, how do you do a 1099 for that? For example, the vendor is set up at the top level, but entity A and B uses the same vendor.
So that's a great question. Those in the multi-entity settings, when we reviewed at the beginning of this session, we reviewed the issue a separate 1099 per entity. So the entity in which that transaction originates from will carry that balance. And when you select this report, for example, it will give you the amounts that are relevant to that vendor for that entity. And then if you pre-filter this report again to select your second entity in which that vendor belongs, you'll be able to see the amount that belongs to that vendor in the second respective entity. So in the multi-entity settings, under your company settings in the subscriptions, this requires admin permissions to view, but in your multi-entity management, you want to make sure that you have issue a separate 1099 per entity. And then you will want to make sure that your entity settings have the correct address and federal EIN number, and then Intacct will separate out the rest.
Okay, and we have a second question.
And yes, I do see the second question.
Okay. How do we print our 1099s net of credits? We might have paid someone $1,000 and then applied a $25 credit. So their 1099 should only be for $975, but the 1099 is printing for $1,000.
That's a great question. And we actually just saw this in our little video here. When you're printing that 1099 form, you are wanting to exclude the credit card or include bills paid with your credits or advances. So that in this particular report is going to tie out to your 1099 filing. If you need to actually exclude those or include those as part of the 1099 filing and it's not printing, you need to go back to the originating credit where that credit is located, and you need to make sure that the 1099 box is checked for that credit. And if you don't have the option to edit that particular credit, you should have the option to reclass. And when you reclass the credit, you'll have the option to select the checkbox for 1099. Once you select that checkbox on the credit for 1099, it should net out your bill and the credit that you applied to that bill to be that $975 instead of $1,000. But if your credit doesn't actually have that checkbox checked for 1099, then it will show $1,000. So you need to make sure that the bill and the corresponding credit both have the 1099 checkbox next to it checked. Both great questions. Thank you for your feedback. All right, so this is actually a great time to pause for our second polling question.
Awesome. Here we go. When it comes to payroll, please choose one. Then the choices are: we use ADP Workforce Now, we use Paychex, we use another third-party solution, we use a custom solution, we manage payroll in-house. Final choice is I don't know. So we'll give you a few moments there. I'll close down the poll in 3 seconds. And here are our results. Most are using another third-party solution, but it looks like about a third of the crowd is either using ADP Workforce Now and a smaller subset Paychex. So thank you.
All right, so in the next couple of slides, we are going to review the types of updates containing 1099 information. Earlier in the previous slides, we reviewed the vendor and employee 1099 records and how to be able to edit those vendor and employee 1099 records. By editing the employee or vendor records themselves, you can change the box and the form, the corresponding form and box for that particular vendor or employee if that should change. You may, however, incur instances in which you will need to update existing 1099 transactions and import or amend your opening balances for either vendors or employees. Instances in which you may need to update existing 1099 transactions are perhaps you're going through this 1099 cleanup process, you are discovering that you have paid vendors all year long that are 1099 eligible vendors. However, you did not have those transactions marked as 1099, or you did not have the vendor set up as 1099. Perhaps you received a W-9 that now changes their vendor 1099 eligibility status. Those are all instances in which you may need to update the transactions that are already existing in your software to be able to be 1099 reportable. You may also have existing transactions in which perhaps you have a 1099 vendor that you have marked as a miscellaneous box 1 through 10, for example, but you notice and realize that this particular vendor or employee does not need to be a miscellaneous vendor or employee. All of the transactions coded to that particular record need to be form NAC box 1. That would be also another instance in which you need to update all previously coded 1099 transactions to a different form. All right, so let's take a look at importing open 1099 vendor or employee balances. So perhaps you have added new entities into your Intacct instance, or you have implemented Sage Intacct this year as your accounting software solution, and you need to bring over existing amounts paid to vendors up through a certain point, more likely than not up through your go live date in Intacct. Regardless if that particular vendor or employee meets the threshold or not, because perhaps you went live in November and you did not update your opening balances for vendors or employees that are 1099 eligible. And now you have gone live and you have November and December in which you have transactions coded to that vendor or employee that do qualify for 1099. However, you also need to bring in those starting balances for that vendor or employee. This would be a great example of how to add or import those open 1099 vendor employee balances to make sure that you're capturing everything up to a certain point so that you're including any historical transactions for 2023 up to a certain point to get a complete picture of the total amounts filed that will be filed for that vendor or employee. Now we've already taken a look at the vendor and employee records and how to edit those. And when you click on that Form 1099 link, it will give you an option to add initial values for the 2023 or previous years, and then select your box, your form, your box, and then your entity. Now we'll take a look at how to import open 1099 balances for either vendors or employees. To import those balances, you will need to navigate to your company setup tab and import data so that you can retrieve the template for those 1099 opening balances. You'll want to download the template and then pre-populate it with the information that you need for that 1099 eligible vendor. In the next slide, we'll review an example of a pre-populated template that's ready for import. And alternatively, you can also edit or manually enter those opening balances by editing the vendor or employee records directly. So here we have a sample template that is ready for import to import opening balances for vendors. It will be the same template. It'll be a very similar template to the employee open 1099 balances. The headers will just say the employee name and ID, etc. This, in this case, we're taking a look at a sample template for the vendor. So once you have cleaned up your vendors and you notice that this particular vendor, you're bringing in a vendor, you're bringing in sets of vendors, you notice that they need opening balances to start off in the system. This template I have marked with the green columns being the required columns for information that you need to populate in order to bring those opening balances in. Outside of the vendor name, and you'll notice that the vendor name column is not highlighted. This is not an actual importable column, even though it's included in that template. It's simply used for your reference to ensure that the vendor ID matches the name, that you know that vendor 001 is Sample Sam or vendor 675 is Geek Squad IT LLC. That vendor ID is either a new vendor ID in your Intacct system or a pre-existing. You'll just have to match up the vendor ID. The vendor ID does need to pre-exist in the system in order for you to be able to update that vendor record for opening balances. So here we can see that in the first column, we populated our vendor ID as it corresponds to the vendor name in our Intacct instance. In the third column, we populated the entity to which the numbers, the opening balances belong to. So for example, if we had Sample Sam in entity 100, 205, and 401, we would also want to populate 3 lines for each of those individual opening balances as they correspond to that entity's opening balance for that vendor. And then the next two columns are going to be your form type and box number. So here we have an example of NEC box 1 and miscellaneous box 3. You want to pay attention to row 2 of the import template, in which it will tell you the valid values that you have as an option to populate in this form. So if you type in miscellaneous, it's not going to import because the valid value for 1099 miscellaneous is MISC. And then in the amount in the last column, I've populated the amounts that correspond to these vendors and their respective entities, form types, and form box numbers. You'll notice that in the amount that's highlighted in yellow for vendor 48 Tile Pros in entity 401, I have denoted an amount that is less than the threshold eligibility for 1099 form NEC box 1 at $205.15. The filing requirements start at $600. However, if you have gone live in the system prior to a certain date, and that $205.15 will get you past the threshold of other current transactions in the system that you have started using after your go live date, perhaps, you will want to bring in any eligible amounts for a 1099 eligible vendor so that it captures the whole picture of your pre-go live date, for example. The next slide, we have an option to update existing vendor 1099 transactions via a CSV import. You can use the 1099 transaction update template to either update transactions that are already tagged for 1099 treatment to a different form type and box, for example, going from a miscellaneous to an NEC. You can update all transactions for a vendor, including those not currently flagged for 1099 treatment with a specified default form type and box. For example, you notice that you have a 1099 eligible vendor that you have not marked those transactions as 1099. You can go back retrospectively and update all of those transactions to be 1099 eligible. And then you can also update the 1099 name for a vendor. An important note here is that this import does not update the following. Imported bills marked as paid. If you have imported bills that are marked as paid on the import, those will not be able to be updated by this import template. Instead, you'll want to manually update those bills in Sage Intacct, or you'll want to do a reclassify to where you can reclassify those imported bills with a paid status to have the 1099 box check override on those bills. This import template does not import or update vendor opening balances. So the slide before this, we looked at how to import through a CSV file vendor or employee opening balances. We just reviewed how to do that in the last couple of slides. This particular template talks about transactions and not opening balances. So it will not update any opening balances. It will also not update transactions that have been manually tagged for 1099. So if you have manually edited a bill and manually tagged it for 1099, it will not update those sets of transactions. This import template also does not create new transactions. To create new 1099 transactions, you'll want to set up your vendor or employee for 1099 treatment and then import or add your bills in Intacct, in which Intacct will automatically tag those bills with 1099 default information. So let's take a look here at a pre-populated template for your 1099 transactions updates. Here we still have our vendor ID, but the template looks a little bit different. We've got our 1099 name, the default 1099 type, and default 1099 box. These fields are only updated if there is a value present. If the value is blank in these fields, the system leaves the existing values in the record. To remove existing values, you can enter the value null in these fields and it will remove existing values at the vendor or employee record. Now, the following 3 columns here, to update our transactions, we have the options of Y, N, and A. The Y value updates only transactions that have already been tagged for 1099 treatment. For example, you might need to change existing 1099 transactions from one box form to another box form. The N values leaves the transactions the same, no changes are made. The value A updates all transactions for that vendor, including transactions not previously tagged for 1099 treatment. In other words, every transaction for the vendor will be marked as 1099. And then you have the option to update from date to date. So here I've populated from the beginning of the year up through to date, but you can have, you can populate these fields as you need, as you see fit.
Thelma, do you have time for a question?
I still have a couple of slides to get through, so let's, if we
We'll
can,
hold it then.
Yeah,
Very good.
Let's hold it, and I want to make sure we get through the next couple of slides. There's so much about 1099 slides and 1099 information. I wish I could, I could spend a couple of hours talking about it. So it's kind of hard to condense it all into the time that we have here in our webinar. All right, so let's take a look at our supported forms and printed supplies. On this slide, you can see a listing of all of the tax forms supported by Sage Intacct. Now, the only caveat here is only printed 1099 forms are the only ones that are supported by Sage Intacct are the ones that are purchased directly through Sage Intacct. We often get a lot of support cases of my 1099 forms are not aligning to the format that I have on the forms that I ordered. And the first question that we then pose is, did you order those forms directly through Sage Intacct, or did you order them from an outside source? To purchase your Sage Intacct supported forms, you can go to your home page, and in the bottom right, there will be a link to checks and supplies, and that is the same area where you can order your 1099 forms. And in the slide, you have a little link. This link, once you get the copy of the slides, will take you directly to the site where you can order Sage Intacct specifically supported forms. Okay, so here we have our e-file options. You have 2 options in Intacct to e-file. The first one is to e-file through Sage Intacct, which is to export a, well, this, I should backtrack. The first option is to produce a 1099 e-file for export. This 1099 file for export is used to then file outside of Sage Intacct via a third-party application site, etc., perhaps like the IRS file system. The second option is to utilize tax bandits. (1099) e-filing by tax bandits is Sage Intacct's trusted partner in an already pre-built integration. Tax bandits, when filing 1099s through tax bandits, you don't have to export your files or manipulate any sort of spreadsheet data. This is a seamless integration that allows you to share the 1099 data with the click of a button, where you can then continue to the tax bandits site and electronically file the forms. Now, to begin the process in Sage Intacct, where you create the batch of files that you send to tax bandits, you then will go into tax bandits where you complete the e-filing process and file the forms with the IRS. In tax bandits directly, you can file state and federal forms, you can mail out your forms, and you can grant online access to recipients. You know, tax bandits, just like any other e-filing system out there, has its own pricing. So you'll want to, once you create that tax bandits account, you'll see all of the pricing and the tiers of how they're designated to file for the volume, and depending on if you're wanting to mail out the forms, etc. On this slide, we're going to review the Sage Intacct system requirements that you'll need to have in place prior to filing with Tax Bandits. In Sage Intacct, the first order of business is we are going to make sure that in the company settings, we are subscribed to Sage Cloud Services if you are not already subscribed. Now, again, there are permissions, there are admin permissions for this to be able to subscribe to certain features in Intacct. You'll go to your company admin subscriptions and then make sure that Sage Cloud Services are toggled on. If they're already turned on, you can skip this step and go on to step B, which is to enable 1099 e-filing powered by Tax Bandits. This is going to be in the accounts payable configuration page at the top level. And in the 1099 area where we had the form and amount overrides, the third option that was grayed out, this is going to be to enable 1099 e-filing by Tax Bandits. This is going to be turned off until you have Sage Cloud Services turned on. So part A of the Sage Intacct requirements will have to be completed prior to being able to actually check that box in AP configuration. Now on the Tax Bandits side of the site requirements, you're going to want to create a Tax Bandits account, and then you'll run your corresponding 1099 reports, you'll export your files, make sure that everything looks correct, update information as you need, and then Tax Bandits will walk you through the rest. This link on this particular site, on this slide, will take you directly to the Help Center where you have a distinct and full information resource guide to help you through this process. So make sure to check it out after we wrap up this webinar. So we are going to go ahead and pause for the third polling question here.
All right, our polling question is, will you be attending Sage Intacct Transform February 26th through the 29th? Yes, maybe, no. Very good. I'm going to be closing down the poll in a few moments, and I won't share the results so we can get back to the presentation. And I'm ending the poll. All right.
Okay, so let me backtrack a step just a little bit, and I'll share this other slide with you. This is for 1099 Sage Intacct. If you've previously seen the video library on in the Help Center, this is a little snippet of the 1099 e-filing options. You can see these videos are relatively short, they're concise, and they'll give you your starting information for additional videos of the exact buttons that you'll need to press. You also have this link in this slide that will take you directly to this page. So I'll give you an example of how this link works. If I go ahead and click this link, it will take me directly to the video library for taxes and 1099s. And this is where you can see I have a little snippet of these videos. Now, in this Help Center is where you can also research all of those, the rest of your 1099 information. So I'll toggle back here. And if we go to the Tax Bandit site requirements and click on this link, it will take you to the Help Center that tells you all about the e-filing powered by Tax Bandits, the proper, all of your proper requirements to be able to set up your Tax Bandit accounts, how to create your batch of 1099 files to send to Tax Bandits, and then everything else regarding your e-filing through the our partner Tax Bandits software here. So with that, we are going to pause for our Q&A. Dawn, let me know how we're doing on time to be able to take a couple questions here.
You know, I think we took care of the question via the chat. Oh, here's another one. Could we file 1098s as well using intact tax bandits?
So let's take a look here. We've got your eligible options for the tax forms supported by Sage Intacct are these forms right here. So in tax bandits, I don't know if I can speak to 1098 specifically because that's not a form supported by Sage Intacct. So I would, to set up a tax bandits account is free up until the point where you actually have to e-file these forms. So I'm sure that that particular question you'll be able to answer if you sign up for the tax bandits account. I am not able to speak to that particular question directly since 1098s are not supported in Intacct. So there's no information to pull from Intacct to tax bandits. Tax bandits with the Sage Intacct integration is generally meant to pull existing and eligible amounts for the listed forms here.
Got it. Thank you. That's good to know about the free account, so you can do a little bit of exploring. So thank you. All right. Um, if if we didn't get to your question, or if you think of another one, we'll be resuming with Toma in just a little bit. But right now, I'd like to bring Jason Boyd on board. If he could go ahead and share his title slide. Jason Boyd is also with LBMC Technology Solutions. He is a field network engineering manager, and he serves us as our security lead. And so he's going to be talking about CyberScan essentials just for a few minutes today. So Jason, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good day, everyone. As introduced, I'm Jason Boyd, and I'm a manager with our network engineering team. Before joining LBMC Technologies last year, I spent over 2 decades in internal IT, engineering, management, and cybersecurity for a small enterprise. As I'm also the security lead, I'm pretty passionate about cybersecurity, which is a critical subject for you as business leaders. You can't read the news without a data breach or ransomware story, and it's not just large companies. Sage released a study in the last few days that 48% of small and medium businesses have had a cybersecurity incident in the last year. Our network engineering team manages or supports IT for clients of many sizes and industries, giving us a bird's eye view of the threats and how businesses like yours are affected. We're constantly looking at the threats and how we can keep our clients protected. And I'm going to give you a quick introduction to CyberScan Essentials, which is part of that effort. So what is CyberScan Essentials? It's a high-level scan of your internal network, as well as a check of your Office 365 configuration if you use that tool. Think of this as taking the security temperature or security vitals of your network. There shouldn't be any negative impact to your systems. This is actually a smaller version of a scan that we run every day for our numerous managed services clients. From this scan, we'll give you a report that's a risk summary and a security report card to help you identify your company's level of risk and also some cyber hygiene. We want to help you secure your organization system, so we're offering this at no cost to everyone on this call. So it's free, so what do you really get? We designed this with business leaders in mind. The report puts the high-level information in a red, yellow, green format so you can quickly see where you are on each item, but it also includes detail to make it actionable by your team. To give you a better idea, let's look at the first page. Keep in mind that subsequent pages give you more detail in a KPI type of view. The C excuse me, the C is the company risk level score. It's focused on the number and severity of vulnerabilities that the tool finds, specifically related to software updates and patching, because a patching program is one of the foundational ways to protect your systems and your network. 60% of breaches are linked back to patches that are available but just haven't been installed. The next item you see is the Office 365 score. O365 is a critical tool for most, and it has some great security tools built in, but they have to be configured properly. This score compares your settings to Microsoft's best practices to give you a temperature of your O365 security posture. To give you an idea, in our managed practice, our goal is a score of 80% or above where possible. Multi-factor authentication is a significant part of this score and is one of the most important basic protections you can have. I'll inject a bit of a recommendation here. If you don't currently have multi-factor authentication configured, I strongly advise adding it as soon as possible. Microsoft themselves estimate that having MFA reduces the risk of compromised accounts by over 99%. So the bottom line is we want to help you identify some critical information about your network. Again, CyberScan Essentials is something we're offering at no cost to everyone on this call so that we can help you minimize your risk. If you'd like to take advantage or need more information about this or other ways we can help, please reach out to Deanna Brooks or Ashley Kennelly, who are on this call, and they'll be glad to coordinate some next steps. Their contact information is on the screen here. Our team is here to help. We do focus on small and medium businesses, but we work with clients of all sizes, and we have expertise across the entire IT spectrum. Our tech care plans can be used to provide full or co-managed services, and we bundle the security and management tools you need into that plan. We have 24/7, 365 monitoring and support from our US-based staff, so you're covered. And this ensures someone is always on watch because the people who perpetrate the attacks actually pick up their activity on weekends and holidays when they know that internal IT teams are less available. Building managed IT with Sage Intacct support means one help desk process and one contact point for issues and concerns. And if you don't need managed IT, we have customizable solutions to get you the tools, expertise, and support to fit whatever needs you may have. We can do as much or as little as you need. And with that, if we have any time left, I will open the floor for questions.
3 bullets, Jason. What exactly is the deliverable? How much time will it take? And what is the cost?
So the cost is free. We will do the basic report for you, and we will deliver it as a PDF that you can use however you choose. For how long it takes, we do have just a little bit of setup involved. In most cases, 30 minutes or less, and we expect that scan to run somewhere between 2 and 4 hours, depending on the size of your network.
Great. Thank you for that summary.
Certainly.
I don't see any questions. So let's move to our, is the next poll question coming up? All righty. Here's the poll question. Would you like to discuss scheduling CyberScan Essentials for your organization? And as Jason mentioned, this is free. It's not it's not a time-consuming exercise to go through, and it gives you a great snapshot of what your status is and what might need attention. So great. I'll end the poll. Remember, if you are here for CPE credit, you need to answer all poll questions. So please make a selection before I close this down. And next up will be Brandon Tobin. So Brandon, if you would like to take and share your slides. Now, let me just quickly introduce Brandon. Brandon is the account executive for Avid Exchange. He and his team work with LBMC Technology Solutions very, very closely. If you were in attendance at our employee recognition dinner in Charlotte this past October, you may have met Brandon. So without any further ado, Brandon, go right ahead.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Great. Well, happy to be here. Appreciate the invite. And I just had a couple of minutes today to properly introduce myself. My name is Brandon Tobin, and I've been working with finance professionals in the software as a service space for about the past 10 years. Thomson Reuters, Bill.com, before this, and now Avid Exchange. Obviously, I'm kind of in the more customer-facing role. I've always tended to work more with folks using Sage products, especially Intacct. Actually, when I was at Bill, I worked specifically with the Sage team directly for nonprofits, and kind of in a similar role here as an account executive. So today I was going to share with you a little bit about our company really quickly, what we do for our customers, and I have a couple of stories to share as far as how some folks have saved a lot of time and money and reduced a lot of risk and headaches by getting not just automation, but like a properly controlled process with better visibility in place for their accounts payable. Everything from, we say procure to pay, everything from entering invoices, the approvals and the audit trails that go along with that, all the way to coding, and then eventually us processing the payment for our customers as well. So I'll start off with a couple stories real quick. Big pet lover. I have my cat Luna right here, my loyal assistant. And so I love this story about Vets Pets. They're in North Carolina, just as we are. We're headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. Their big problem was a lot of bottlenecks around accounting. They were manually cutting checks for every invoice and hand signing a ton of checks, mailing the checks to vendors. It's not really listed here too, but kind of one of the recurring themes I'm hearing more, especially lately, tis the season to be jolly, but it's also tis the season for post office problems and stuff getting lost in the mail, and even check fraud is on the rise. The post office itself has come out and said that rates of mail fraud have doubled since last year, and they're really discouraging folks from sending checks manually in the mail. So that's one area that we've really been able to help out our customers as far as like reducing risk by sending checks for them, dealing with positive pay, and helping to convert and onboard their vendors to ACH or other electronic methods of payment. In this particular case, Vets Pets actually went through a pretty lengthy evaluation process with 3 other vendors after going to a big conference. And they just decided on Avid Exchange because we've got a full circle platform, that can handle invoices, approvals, as well as the payment, and integrates very well, especially with Sage Intacct. So their result was that they saved a lot of time, they saved a lot of money. Kind of mentions here, there's no approval limits, but I also like to point out too that there's no payment limits. If you look at some of the other vendors out there, I was just talking to somebody using Mineral Tree, for example, where they had a rent payment that was $7,000, but with that platform, they couldn't send payments larger than $5,000. So they ended up having to pay it in 2 separate payments, and it was a pain. So we don't have any limits on payment sizes or the number of approvals you could have in your workflow. And it has pretty intelligent routing as far as approvals go too. And obviously, like, going paperless is great. No more paper, no more stamps, no more filing cabinets. And kind of mentions here too, not needing to add quite as much headcount. It's just helping somebody get started with us. It was also on Sage, and she was like the director of finance, and she kind of had a back and forth with her CEO. And the CEO was like, well, I'll let you get AvidXchange if you reduce your headcount by 1, you're gonna have to lay somebody off. And she's like, no way. This isn't to replace somebody's job. We're behind right now by like 100 invoices. This is to help us get caught up, and so that we don't have to add 3 more headcount next year. And he's like, all right, fine. So she kind of won him over. Thank you, by the way, Karen. Have used AvidXchange at a previous employer and loved it. I will give you your $20 after this. Just kidding. Ed Staub and Sons. This is another customer story. It's a little bit bigger, actually, as opposed to just 60 checks a week or so. They're actually processing hundreds of invoices per day, and it's really helped them out because they don't have to chase down payments or kind of drop what they're doing whenever there's a vendor inquiry about, hey, what's the status of this check in the mail, or what's the status of this invoice or that. There's a vendor portal where vendors can have access to see everything as well. In addition, AvidXchange has a vendor supplier services team, kind of like customer support, actually, for the vendors. So we do a lot of that blocking and tackling, handling those types of vendor inquiries on behalf of our customers, which can be really nice. So really, I wouldn't say like any size customer. I'll skip ahead for a second. For a good 20 years or so, AvidXchange has really been focused on serving customers in the mid-market. I would say anything over like 100 or a couple of 100 invoices and payments per month is where the ROI really makes sense. And we definitely have customers in the tens of thousands of invoices and payments per month. That vendor network I alluded to is also really big. We have, at this point, over 1 million vendors receiving payment through the AvidPay network by check, by direct deposit, and also by virtual card. We integrate with virtually every version of Sage, and a good 1/3 of our 1,600 plus employees are actually customer support. Most all of them located in our Charlotte, North Carolina headquarters, so we don't outsource our support overseas either, which is getting more and more rare these days. So big picture as far as what we can do and offer for our customers. As far as like ingesting and capturing and doing the data entry of invoices, we would set up an email inbox where it'll capture that header level information and enter it with better accuracy than a lot of the other providers that do something like this out there too, because we have a team of human indexers reviewing our OCR, kind of scanning for accuracy. So the industry standard is like 75% accurate. Ours is more like 99% accurate. I kind of mentioned, there's no limit on the number of approvers you could have in a workflow. As a matter of fact, we don't even charge for approvers, which is nice. If you see in the bottom left there, unlimited users, there's no user licensing fees. We charge based on usage, the number of invoices we process for you, and the number of payments that we process for you at the end of each month. So it's a really scalable pricing model as well. Like as customers get bigger and process more volume, it's cheaper per item. And you don't have to pay for user licenses, which is nice. We'll also assist with PO matching, coding. Kind of spoke to payments a little bit already. One thing I didn't mention is that for some customers, it can make sense to share rebates. We've got industry leading rebates, some of the highest basis points consistently that apply across all electronic payment types. And we have some customers that it more than covers the cost of AvidXchange, where they've turned their accounts payable team from a cost center into a profit center. They're actually making more in rebates than it costs them to process their payables once they get going with AvidXchange. So that's the big picture. I guess one last thing to say is it's actually pretty quick and easy to set up. It's a pretty light lift compared to some other big projects. It can take as little as 1 to 2 months from kickoff to go live after testing and training and everything is done. It can really free up a lot of time and give folks time back to kind of attend to more higher level accounting functions that actually require, a human eye and aren't quite so easily automatable. So that's about all I had to share today. We're going to have a poll question here pretty soon. And then I've also included my contact information at the end. So if anybody is kind of got this on their radar as far as automating accounts payable, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to your LBMC account manager, and they'll get you in touch with us.
Great. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks.
Great stuff, and a wonderful unsolicited testimonial. We love when that happens. So the fifth poll question is, which of the following is a concern for your organization? This is a multiple choice question. Check fraud or post office issues, which Brandon brought up, time spent on vendor inquiries, difficulty converting vendors from checks to ACH, long financial close process, limited visibility into spend, payment status, and approvals, or some other frustration. And while we're doing that, Jamie, I'm assuming that this is a question for Brandon. If it's not, let me know. How customizable is the auto coding technology? Can you handle multiple coding per vendor based on specifics on the invoice?
That's a really good question. Because I remember when I worked at Bill, there were some limits on things like custom fields, like if you had project or fund or grant or something in your GL besides the usual class, location, department, there wasn't really a way to accommodate that. And it would require manual touches on the Intacct side. So happy to say that yes, you can customize and add those custom fields on the Avid Exchange side. It will sync over to Intacct with no more manual touches required. And I think kind of your question more specifically was also asking like automating coding and setting up templates for maybe like the same vendor, but if it's serving like different entities or different locations. And yes, you can break it out and customize it that way as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brandon. Let's see. There might be another question in here. Nope, we got them all. Very good. So thank you very much, Jason, Brandon. We're going to turn this back over to Toma to give us some release highlights.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Brandon and Jason, for sharing your information as well. All right, so we are here at the second session of the webinar where we'll cover the new features that were released with the R4 update that happened on November 10th. So a lot of you all have probably used some of the functionality or have been curious about some of the new features that were rolled out. And here we'll go over some of the more frequently used features that will probably apply to the vast majority of our participants. Let's take a look at our agenda for the second half of our webinar here. We are going to review the new features that were released on November 10th. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll also take a look at additional resources and review the dates for the upcoming new features that will be released as part of the 2024 calendar year. As a reminder, Sage Intacct releases these updates on a quarterly cycle. Many of these updates are based on the ideas that have been submitted by customers that are posted into the Sage Intacct community. If you don't have access to the community or you would like to gain access to the community, please let us know, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to assist you in gaining that access. To access the release notes and see a full listing of everything that was released in the R4 cycle, you can view those notes directly from your homepage screen in the Intacct environment. There's also, for some of the more popular release highlights, there are video recordings and more detailed information available for your review. So here, if you are in your Sage Intacct environment and you are in your home page, you'll see that this first bubble over here on the left side of the screen is the 2024 release cycle. If you click on the read the release notes, you'll be able to see all of the release notes. You'll be able to view a highlights of some of the bigger releases that happened within this Q4 release. And then you'll also be able to scroll down specifically by each module to view the release notes. Right above the release notes, there is the 2024 release calendar. So you can put these calendar dates, say the dates for the release updates that will happen beginning on February 16th of next year. And this is accessible from your homepage. And if you're not on the homepage, you can always click the little home button next to your application screen. That will take you to the homepage. A little housekeeping, you've already seen the video icon and the link icon and the people icon. There will be a short little demo on one of the accounts receivable updates that we'll take a look at. The release slides will follow a general pattern of features that were added and features that were updated. The added features are something brand new, so you may need to go into each one of your modules wherever that feature was added for you to see additional permissions, because once features are rolled out as part of the release cycle, they are automatic. You don't have to really enable much in the software system to have those features. However, you may need to either check a few more boxes for permissions or to actually enable that feature in the area where it was added. You may have to check a box in the configuration settings. So let's go ahead and get started with our 6th polling question of the session.
Very good. So here's the 6th poll question. I am interested in learning more about, and this is multiple choice. You can answer as many as you like. Sage Intacct Payroll powered by ADP, Sage Intacct Dynamic Allocations, Interactive Custom Report Writer, sorry about that, Sage Intacct Project Accounting, Inventory, not sure. Give you a few moments to answer that. Also, while people are answering that question, the question that was posed in the Q&A came from an anonymous attendee. I've had a couple of the consultants who are online volunteer to help out with your questions, but I don't know who you are. So if you could go in the Q&A and provide me with your email, we've had a couple of people say they'd be happy to get back in touch with you. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And in the interest of time, Toma, I'm going to send it right back to you.
Great, thanks, Dawn. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with our company admin and user experience added features. Here I've listed three of them for us to look at. We've got a new look. So this is one of the major updates that have happened, and you've noticed that the colors have changed. Previously, they were blue. Now we're in a sage green, dark green color format. Sage Intacct is working towards a more seamless experience for all Sage products, including Sage Intacct. So here you will notice where the buttons, menus, tabs, and any other links are now updated with the new colors. Our second added feature here is to mask employee bank details. Now you have the option to protect employee sensitive information with the option to mask employee bank details in the audit trail when running an audit trail report. With the bank account information, when the bank account information changes for a particular employee, the updated bank details also appear in the audit trail. However, you have the option to decide whether to hide or reveal this information from the audit trail. When you turn this setting on or off, it impacts all new audit trail entries. Existing audit trail entries will not change retroactively. So here, to enable the setting, you'll go to the company setup configuration for your company, and then you'll make sure to select the box for employee bank details in the audit trail. You'll click on the mask employee mask those employee bank details and click save. And then Sage Intacct has also rolled out an enhanced email delivery service. The enhanced email delivery service features the support for DKIM authentication, the industry-leading standard for email security. It ensures that your emails are delivered to their intended recipients quickly and reliably. Additionally, the enhanced email insights provide visibility into the delivery status of your emails. Intacct is rolling out this particular service in phases, but if you would like to try it sooner, you can take advantage of that by signing up in the link to begin that process. So there is a link in this slide. It will take you directly to where this particular feature was rolled out, where you can sign up to be more of an early adopter of this particular feature. All right, let's look at two functionalities that were updated for the company admin and user experience. The first one being the sandbox management. Before our fourth quarter release update, only customers and partners who were setting up sandboxes for the very first time could create, refresh, and manage their sandboxes directly in their environment. Now, most customers can create, refresh, and manage their sandboxes directly in their Sage Intacct environment and do not have to go into a separate login screen for that. You can also, so in order to be able to have this feature added directly into your company settings, you will have to submit an initial sandbox case directly to Sage Intacct support for them to start the process. After the particular sandbox management feature is enabled by the provisioning team, you can begin to manage your sandboxes directly from the company's admin tab. If you'd like more information on how to submit that case to Sage Intacct for them to begin provisioning this, if you do have the sandbox as part of your Sage Intacct subscription, let us know, and one of our consultants will be able to provide you information on how to submit that support case. Now, the other option here on our enhanced feature is the enhanced list views. Previously, this was rolled out for vendors in accounts payable in a couple of release cycles earlier this year. You now have the option to turn the beta interface list view for other areas, including the ones that are on this slide here, bulleted. You have them for attachments, departments, customers, locations, classes, etc. These enhanced list views give you the option to personalize your list views. You can leverage more advanced filters, and then you can also see the record details side by side, meaning if you enable this beta lists view, you're able to view the vendor and then everything related to that vendor in a split screen. So if you haven't tried the beta list view and you'd like to start by one of the vendors beta list view, I suggest you try it and see if you like that functionality, because you can always turn it off and go back to the regular list view. All right, so in accounts payable, we have an added feature that I'll go over, and this is to fix mistakes on submitted bills. This feature does only apply to those customers in which in their Intacct environment they have turned on their bill approvals. This does not apply to purchasing approvals. This is specifically for accounts payable if you have bill approvals turned on. You now have the ability to update a bill that you've previously submitted for approval. If you have bill approvals turned on in accounts payable, there's a new option, which is the recall option, that allows you to remove a submitted bill from the approval queue and return it to an editable state, which means that you can edit any of those details and then submit it for approval. So you'll update that bill, you'll resubmit it for approval, and then you also have the option to recall and resubmit a bill as often as you need to. The recall button is available on the bills list and in the bill detail view for bills that are in a submitted state only. If the bill is already posted, if it's been paid, if it's been reversed, you don't have this option because it's specifically meant to work for bills and bill approvals that have been submitted, but maybe you need to recall it, edit some details, and resubmit it again. This particular feature is already available to any user who has the permissions to edit the bill. But again, it's only applicable to those customers who are using bill approvals in accounts payable. We have some updated features in accounts payable. First one is some added functionality to the vendor aging report. The vendor aging report has new filters for including multiple vendors, including a vendor group, or being able to select parent-children vendors. The second update here is a newly required field for vendors if you are using vendor payments powered by CSI. So if you're using vendor payments powered by CSI, when you add or edit a vendor, there is now an option to designate the vendor as an individual person. This particular option masks sensitive data for security purposes when using vendor payments powered by CSI. This field is now a required field. And then our last updated feature here is the new pay bills column. This little snippet down here shows you the pay bills area, and there has been a new column that's been added that shows your preferred payment method. This preferred payment method is attached at the vendor record level, and it shows you the vendor's preferred payment level prior to you filtering out your bills, your pay bills view for any other filters. When you select the payment method for paying your bills, such as your check or your recorded transfer through an EFT, you can now see which vendors actually prefer this payment using this payment method. You can then make your bill selections accordingly. Now, if at the vendor record level, your preferred payment method for that vendor is left blank, you will not see this field populated. It will just show it will show a blank field. So you still have to go to the vendor, edit the vendor, and then select their preferred payment method for what their preferred payment method is. All right, so in accounts receivable, there is a new feature that is rolling out for those customers who are using Sage Cloud services and bank feeds through those Sage Cloud services, and it is called the Bank Transaction Assistant. It's a brand new feature that's now being rolled out. And what it allows you to do is if you have those bank feeds for your accounts, you can now assign customers directly to bank transactions. So for example, you can pre-filter your bank transactions listing to pre-filter those for deposits coming in. And then in that view, you're able to assign customers to those transactions. And then you can receive payments against those transactions that have invoices in accounts receivable, or you can create advances for those transactions that have come through the bank feed if there are no invoices. And then once you either create those advances or apply those payments from the bank transaction to a customer or a customer's invoice, you can commit those payments and advances, and those will show up in the reconciliation as a match, meaning that deposit came in and it's now a match to the payment that you received through that deposit for that customer's invoice. We'll take a look a little bit further into this feature. So in your bank transaction screen, if you have that bank feed available, you have a couple of options here now. You have your assign to customer and then receive payments. So the first step is to assign customers to those bank feed transactions that are coming in. And at that point, it's those transactions, unless you have some rules in those deposits, they have not hit the GL yet. The second step of this is to receive payments for those deposits. And then there is an additional feature that we'll cover in accounts receivable that doesn't necessarily apply to this bank feed. It applies to receiving payments. So here in this receive payments, you can have your payment application to apply it to a specific set of invoices. You can denote what that payment method was, and this is all directly done from the bank transactions screen for those bank files. Now, the next feature that we'll look at is a newly added feature for applying a single payment to multiple customers. Intacct now supports this functionality. This particular option may be useful when you receive a single payment, but you need to apply it to multiple invoices across different customers. This feature was previously not available. What you would have to do previously, if you received one check that applied to 3 different customers, you would have to split that check payment for those 3 different invoices. So some instances where this could potentially happen is perhaps that there's a school district in which they submit one payment for multiple different invoices that belong to different schools within that district. So those 3 different schools or 4 different schools, however many different schools, are listed as individual customers in Sage Intacct, but the school district itself remits a payment for all 3 or 4, etc. of those customers. They're different customers, but we need to apply one payment to different customers. Another option could be an insurance company submits a single payment for multiple patients at a particular facility. So you have your patients set up as different customers, and then you have an insurance company that submits a payment on behalf of those customers. Those are all different customers. Again, we have a single payment for multiple customers. This option now allows you to choose the invoices, and you can select those invoices across multiple different customers. This option is only available in the receive payments new, not in the legacy receive payments option. So we'll take a look.
Toma,
Yes.
there's a question. Where is this screen? I go to AR, then where do I go?
So great question. We're a little bit ahead of the game on that question. So let's see. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. In order to enable this functionality, there are 2 steps. The first step is that you need to have this functionality be able to be turned on in the accounts receivable configuration page. So in your accounts receivable configuration, in the setup tab, again, you must have admin rights to be able to change your configuration settings. It's at the top level. We'll click configuration, and then we are going to go down to the enable functionality bubble, and all the way at the bottom, you have enable single payments for customers. This is step 1. Step 2, once you have this checkbox checked, is you're going to go down to the let's see, where are we at? To our document sequencing. So a little bit further down in document sequencing, and we are going to populate a payments document sequencing. In order to enable this functionality, you do have to have that populated. Otherwise, if you just check this box and click save, you're going to get an error message that says, please populate a document sequence for payments. So in here, if this is blank, you can go into add, but I'm going to show you the one that I have set up. I've set up a document sequence in which I've called it payment. Oops. I've called it payment. I've given it a 6-digit sequence length, and then I gave it a prefix of PMT with a hyphen separator and a primary sequence denominator here of 1. So our next unused sequence is PMT with a whole bunch of zeros, and then we have a 1. So once you apply that to your payments, you can then click save, and then that functionality will be available. So you may want to go ahead and do a little refresh on your page. And then, so this is where we'll get to the demo portion of this part. We're going to go into accounts receivable, and in the all tab, you have receive payments new. We're going to click here, and then that feature is going to be available. We're going to go ahead and add here. and you will be able to see to apply payment to. This is where you'll be able to see one customer, parent and child customer invoices, or multiple customer invoices. Now, if you select multiple customer invoices, you'll notice that the customer field is now grayed out and the payer name becomes the required field. So here we can say insurance. Oops. Company ABC. We can select our payment method, and then you can either apply the amount received or show invoices first. When you show your invoices, it now gives you a listing of all of the invoices that are in their unpaid state. So here is where you can select your multiple customers. Now, again, you also have the option to still do this for a single customer, but this feature now allows you to select multiple customers and then apply one single payment to those customer invoices. That's a nice little feature. All right, so here we're going to take a look at our cash management features. We have match sequences and the ability to connect to more accounts for our bank feeds. The match sequences are essentially set up to be able to generate a sequence for matched, partially matched, or draft matched transactions, either for bank or credit card accounts. You'll be able to know which transactions matched up to on the Intacct side versus the bank side, because the match sequence will be generated for the Intacct to the bank matched transaction. This particular feature is going to be showed as lowercase match sequences until you reconcile the account, and then you're able to, this match sequence will change to all capital letters once you reconcile the account. Each time a transaction is matched, the unique sequence will be applied to the Intacct match to the bank side and vice versa. Sage Intacct is also powered with Access Pay to allow for more bank feed connections. Access Pay is a fully automated statement retrieval service. It delivers reliable and detailed statement information from two types of files, the MT940 and the BAI2 files provided by your bank directly into Sage Intacct via the Swift network. You are going to have to check with Access Pay to determine if your bank is supported, and there is an additional fee to use this feature via Access Pay. The fee is determined completely by Access Pay, and Sage Intacct has nothing to do with that fee or your subscription. It is completely determined by Access Pay. And so in your release notes here, there's a link to get to the Access Pay where you can learn more information and register with Access Pay to determine if your bank has been supported by this feature. Under the cash management module for the updated feature, we've also got the an early adopter feature in which there are enhanced functionalities to the bank transaction import experience. So currently you have either the option to do bank feeds via the live feed through Sage Cloud Services, or in your reconciliation feed, you can upload a file that is either a CSV file or a QIF file that is able to pull in your transactions for you to be able to match those. This early adopter program, in which it's most likely this feature will be available to everyone across the board in the next couple upcoming update release cycles, but it essentially allows you to, if you're not able to connect via the bank feed, Sage Cloud Services, you're able to import transactions, but they show up in your cash management bank transactions screen for you to be able to then match those transactions, and then they are also there after you have matched them, instead of currently when you're importing them directly into the reconciliation screen, that particular file is no longer there for those transactions to be matched once you reconcile. So this is a neat little feature. It's in the early adopter program. It is coming out, mostly going to be rolled out to everybody here in the next couple of release cycles. Let's go ahead and pause for our 7th polling question.
Great. So our next polling question is, I'd like to work more closely with LBMC by being a customer success story, reviewing my Sage Intacct add-on modules with my strategic manager, learning about other LBMC services beyond Sage Intacct. And I'm not sure. While the folks are answering that poll question, we have another question, Toma. By any chance, do you know if the recall option is the recall option in the works for purchasing transactions?
That I'm not sure about, but it sounds like it would be a great feature to be added.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's a question for Sage Intacct. And community would be a good place to pose that. Would that be your suggestion?
We could either pose an idea or post a question to the community, or I would think that because accounts payable and purchasing go hand in hand, that they're probably working on a feature to submit that if we have purchasing approvals turned on. But purchasing approvals are a lot more detailed than accounts payable, so they're probably having to work through a lot more coding to be able to enable that functionality in purchasing. And it's probably why they've enabled it in accounts payable, I would think. But I would also think that it would probably be in the works, although I don't have a definitive answer on when that would be.
Thank you. I'm going to end the poll, and in the interest of time, turn it back over to Toma.
Thanks, Dawn. All right, so let's review an added feature on the contracts module. In your contracts application, an expense is the cost incurred to obtain or fulfill a contract that is amortized over the term of the contract. Now, previously, you could only add expenses through the contract or the contract line record, and you needed a custom report to be able to view all of those expenses for that contract. With this newly added feature, you can now use the new expense lines list, which is located right under your contract lines in the contract module under the All tab, and easily manage your contract and contract line expenses. From this particular list, you can add new expenses, edit or view existing expenses, and import expenses. And as an added bonus, the expense lines list is already in the enhanced list view, giving you the power of the advanced, using those advanced filters, personalizing your view list, and viewing the list and record details side by side. So this particular feature is already preset with the beta list view that is available in other application areas that we reviewed earlier, but this particular feature already has that pre-built into it. All right, let's take a look here at our advanced reporting. The ICRW. ICRW stands for Interactive Custom Report Writer, and it enables you to build powerful reports across a wide range of reporting areas. ICRW reports provide access on an interactive basis to all of your data in real time. It can combine advanced business intelligence with transactional analysis. So what Intacct has rolled out is the ICRW learning journey. This particular feature is housed in the Help Center, and it combines everything ICRW related all in one centralized location, including an information roadmap for help training videos and Sage University classes, where you can start, continue, or advance your level of ICRW expertise, all from that one location. So in this little link, it will take you to the ICRW learning journal or learning journey. And here's where you can find all things ICRW. This is a great centralized location now where you can take advantage of learning about ICRW. If you are currently using ICRW, now you have this option. If you are not sure about what ICRW means and would like more information on this module addition to the feature addition to the reporting module, please let us know after the webinar. We also have an updated feature to the financial report writer, or I should say the financial reports portion of General Ledger or the reporting center. And this added updated feature is for stored reports. So anywhere where you have stored reports, if you are utilizing that functionality, you now have the option to drill down into the totals and amounts within that report. Now, the only caveat to that is if you have a stored report and you ran that report yesterday or for last month, and you have people in your accounting team that have made changes since that stored report, when you drill down into those numbers and you see the general ledger detail for, in this example, our current assets, and you notice that that general ledger detail shows more or less than what is shown in the drill down from your stored report, that would be the reason why, because your stored report is created at a point in time, whereas the general ledger detail report is current real-time data. So if there have been any changes since the time that you actually stored this report to the time that you there was a change made, that would be the discrepancy for the drill down version of why you're seeing different numbers. Now, on the general ledger, one of the biggest changes that have come out of the R4 release cycle is the ability to change GL account numbers and GL account number lengths. You can now change your settings for the length of account numbers. You can now change the settings for account numbers themselves. We recommend that you allow the changes to account numbers only when you are making those changes, and at other times deselect the allow changes to account numbers option, including the length option on the general ledger configuration page. To change the account numbers, you'll need some additional permissions in the company admin tab for your users, depending on your users or roles. In the general ledger permissions, you'll need to give permission to edit financial account numbers, statistical account numbers, or both. And at that point, you're able to go into the general ledger account and actually edit the account number. Let's take a look at the inventory added functionality. So in the previous release cycles this year, the fulfillment for sales order management under order entry was in the early adopter program. Now this feature is available generally to all customers. Fulfillment gives warehouse managers and warehouse workers and anybody who's working in your order entry inventory module to allow you, give you tools to track and ship sales orders in a timely fashion to keep up with your customer reputation. Also provides pick and pack lists, which make the job of the pickers and the packers on the warehouse floor more efficient and less costly. And as your sales orders move through the fulfillment, Sage Intacct reserves and allocates quantities, so those quantities cannot be used elsewhere. You're able to manage sales orders through the processes of pick, pack, ship, invoice, or any combination of those from a single page. If you are currently utilizing the inventory module and would like a demo of this feature, please reach out to our team to schedule this demo. All right, let's go ahead and pause for our 8th and final polling question of the webinar.
Very good. And I do have a couple of questions that have come up. This is an easy one, everyone. What is your favorite holiday movie? Toma, does this give you the ability to create a sub-account? For example, if I have GL account number 501150, can I create 50150.1? And I should actually be saying 501150.2.
That is a great question. I will probably have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. And then another question, does the contracts module have to be purchased separately?
Yes, the contracts module is a separate purchase. It is a completely separate configuration and is part of your Sage Intacct subscription.
Very good. All right, I'm going to end the poll, and Home Alone, no, I take that back. Elf is the big favorite among this group. Great choice.
Elf is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time.
It is wonderful.
All right, so we've got just a couple more slides to cover. I promise we're almost done with the webinar and we'll let you go. We've got an added feature here in time and expenses, the T&E module. If you're currently using this Sage Intelligent Time, there are a couple enhancements. You have the ability to now sync all draft timesheets to Sage Intacct at once, which makes them easy to include them in the reports from Sage Intacct. There are also options that have been included in this particular feature to monitor when the sync is unsuccessful from SIT into Sage Intacct timesheets. And then under the advanced preferences in your SIT, you have the options to change how you are viewing those draft timesheets, whether you're doing them all at once or you're doing single draft timesheet syncs. You can also edit your email preferences to give you alerts when some of your syncing data has not synced into the timesheets, because by default, this particular feature in SIT is turned off. All right, so this page here, we've got your additional resources. You've got your Sage University where you can sign up and take courses, either depending on your accounting role or your interest to further your knowledge in the modules. Here we've also got a couple of groups and webinars. There's different groups and webinars that are constantly held by Sage Intacct directly, so you can look at those, what those offerings are. You also have a link to the Help Center. We reference the Help Center quite a bit throughout this webinar. And then the community, of course. The community, you can connect with users, search previous cases, resolve product issues with Sage Intacct support, submit ideas for potential future releases. Sage Intacct community is a great way to connect with other Sage Intacct users throughout the country. All right, so here we've got your 2024 release calendar. We've previously also looked at this on how to get to the release notes, but here's another snippet for you for the release calendar. Just as a reminder, these updates are automatic and they don't normally require a whole lot of action on your end. They do provide significant new features and product enhancements. We are going to look forward to our release highlights and future hot topic session for the 2024 calendar year. So keep an eye out for email registrations for those future webinar registrations, where one of our consultants on my team will be hosting that. And also remember to submit ideas for future hot topics to our team for other things that you would like covered. For example, we covered the 1099 since we're gearing up to do 1099 filings, but if there are other hot topics that you're particularly interested in and would like for one of our consultants to do a deep dive into as part of the release notes, let us know and we'll take that into consideration. And with that, we'll pause for Q&A. I hope you all have enjoyed hearing about the additional functionality and our 1099 filing overview. for this.
Great job,
honor.
Toma. We really appreciate it. I wanted to let everybody know, I'm glad that Toma reminded us that, each quarter we do this Hot Topics. LBMC Technology Solutions has a YouTube channel. And so if you've missed Hot Topics in the past and you're interested in things like reconciliation or the ultimate guide to budgeting, you can go to our YouTube channel, and all of our previous Hot Topics are recorded and stored there. So I invite you to do that. Great job, Toma. Really appreciate everything that you have shared with us today. I do not see, I'm giving a final look. Let's see.
But we have
Here's
one
something.
question.
Yeah, 1099 report is not available to me under the AP reports.
So in this case, if you're not seeing your 1099s here under the reports where you have your 1099 report, it's most likely because you don't have the proper permissions. So you'll have to ask your admin on your account to give you those permissions, which are going to be located in the company module under your users. And I'll go ahead and look at this on my end. You'll want to make sure that under your subscription page in the accounts payable for your permissions, if you scroll all the way down on this page, you have the report's permissions. So if you're not seeing that particular report, it's probably because your permission is off for this 1099 report. So you'll have to ask your admin contact to give you permissions for accounts payable for them to scroll all the way down, because there are two particular sections, and then you'll go down to the 1099 report and make sure that this checkbox is on and click save.
Okay, and someone has asked a question: how do we get our CPE credit? One, in order to be eligible, you should have answered all of the poll questions that we put up during the presentation. I submit that to our parent company, who then they've got all of the permissions with NASBA. And you will get a separate email. It's going to be different than the one I send you with the recording, the slides, and the survey link. There will be a separate email that will send, if you're eligible, that will be emailed to you with your certificate. And they ask that you allow up to 2 weeks. If 2 weeks goes by and you haven't seen it, please contact me. And I will do a little bit of footwork for you, but I've only had to do that once since I started here. So they're pretty good about getting those out. I really want to thank Brandon Tobin and Avid Exchange for being our sponsors. You have his contact information in the deck. If you have any questions about Avid Exchange, please reach out to him. And I'd also like to thank Jason Boyd, who put together a free offering to everyone who's on the call. So please, we can never be too secure with our data and our information. No one wants to start the new year out with a breach or a horrible experience like that. So please reach out to him. It's free, so no risk involved. We'd love to see you take part in that. And Toma, as always, you have knocked it out of the park. Thank you so much for putting on this webinar and sharing so much information and your expertise. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you being in attendance. Bye now.